I'm Craig Spencer. I'm the warden of Baluli, which is a component of the Greater Kruger National Park, and the director of Transfrontier Africa, the NGO. It's an ecological management NGO. So I'm a colonial child, if that's still PC to say that these days. My parents are English, and we hail from Botswana. My parents went back overseas. I stayed behind, joined the South African Defence Force, and then worked in the South African government up until 2006. Up until 2006, I was in the Department of Environmental Affairs and also working under the Department of Safety and Security. It sounded a bit odd. The Department of Safety and Security. Let's try it. Bring it here. Well, this is what makes these sort of interviews interesting, I suppose, is the authenticity. I can't leave him in the car because he'll die of heat exhaustion. Yeah, Transfrontier Africa started as an academic, ecological advisory body. You know, so our services are solicited in a park to advise on an ecological question. Are there too many lions? Why are the wildebeest dying? Should we be culling elephants? You know, those sort of debates. And then, yes, we'd throw our academic might behind it. The Transfrontier Africa was set up to... the ethos behind it was that all management decisions should be based on good science. But then our role evolved as the conservation needs cropped up, so to speak. You know? So yes, of course, we could be running around and monitoring the impact of this water hole on the primary production out there, you know, and the vegetation community structure is changing over time and so on. But whilst we're monitoring that, every time we come to our water hole, we find 1,000 dead vultures from the poison that somebody's put in it, and, you know, step over the carcasses of the rotting elephants and so on. So, you know, as conservationists, we had to take out that moral compass and say, where are our resources best needed? And so hence the fact that we ended up with anti-poaching teams and so on. So about 3 years ago, the rhinos started dropping like flies here, you know, from poaching. And they asked us to get involved, but the only way that we could get involved was with our science, you know, with our data loggers and micro scales, and all the equipment and all our investment that we had made was in research and science and monitoring, ecological monitoring. And we were hesitant to get involved, even though some of us had a background in the military and so on. That's what they were actually trying to solicit now. I understand you need to keep your fingers in the dike and stem the tide, so you might need some paramilitary solution as a short, quick fix, if you wish, you know. But how are you going to prevent this from happening again? How sustainable is it to just keep shooting people?
What about the animals? How do you still enjoy living among them?
Yeah, it's our little inspiration. That's why we choose to live like we do, actually. You know,
that's the main reason.
The lions were in camp again the other night. You run and stick the dogs in the cars and hole up in the kitchen because it's the safest place to be. You know, the lions come and go as they please, and the elephants are. You can wake up with an elephant in your face whilst you're brushing your teeth. It'll suck the water out of the basin. You know. The impala always dancing around in the camp. The giraffes are stumbling around. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's nice that we can share our living conditions with the wild animals.
Because you also have privates who live in the reserve, is that right? Because I've been hearing also recently that some of them have been asking for a permit to hunt some elephant because they cause damage.
Yes.
So how does this go down?
This is a problem. Yeah, everybody's an elephant lover until the elephants break into your garden and eat your plants. You know, or suck the water out of your swimming pool, or whatever it might be.
Surely there are more intelligent solutions than just going to shoot one elephant.
For sure. We will deny we call them DCA permits, damage causing animal permits.
Okay.
So unfortunately in a human being's mind, the only solution to any wildlife problem seems to be to shoot it or fence it out. You know, and they put these rickety little electric fences up, you know, that are relics from the old agricultural era. And during a drought period like this, the bull elephants in particular are going to get into these well-irrigated little garden patches. They look like little oases around the old farmhouses and things. Elephants get in, they destroy everything. The guy's not even there. It's a holiday house for him now. He comes down, oh dear, what's this? My garden's been trashed, and that tree was planted by my great-grandfather, and what, you know. And then they immediately demand retribution, because that's a human quality as well.
Yeah.
Ask them, is there a specific elephant that's targeting you? Yes, there's always a specific elephant. You ask him to identify it. It's got big ears, a trunk, and tusks. You know, and they don't care. They just want the first elephant that walks past again shot, so they can appease themselves, you know, and say, yes, you know, that was, justice has been served.
Okay.
On the damaging bastards. And they'll do it for anything. Leopards eat people's pets here. No, the leopards. Somebody shoot a leopard quick. Fufu's dead. You know, but there's always going to be human-wildlife conflict. If they get out of the park, we're doomed. Because then they're in the tribal lands, they're eating corn and killing cattle and doing whatever, and those people, that's their livelihood. Out here, it's a bunch of rich farmers that, in my humble opinion, can go and buy another tree. Our free guineas will figure out at night time.
So what happened 3.5 years ago that made this crisis turn suddenly?
That's a good question, because it's come in waves in the history of rhinos. You know, so this is the third wave of serious poaching pressure on the rhinos. And, you know, they've been resurrected, if you like to use that word, from the brink of extinction because of breeding facilities outside of the national parks. And then they've been reintroduced into the national parks. And this, you know, we haven't really learned a hell of a lot since then either. We still go to our rusty old toolbox and take out the same old rusty tools and put in our old army uniforms and grab our old rusty guns and try and shoot the problem away. And surely history has shown us that doesn't work. So I can't tell you what it is. We believe the spike in the Chinese economy and all that disposable income that the guys have got in the East obviously has a huge influence, and political instability on our borders in Mozambique in particular. I don't want to politicize anything, but you know, you've got these two factions that have been fighting with each other in Mozambique forever, politically and militaristically, and they fund their political campaigns with rhino horn and ivory. It's one of the few resources they can lay their hands on.
I mean, what is the scale of it? Is there now a really big difference between rhinos left now compared to a few years ago? And what about the reintroduction? You know, what numbers are we talking about generally in South Africa in particular?
It's about 3.5 rhinos a day are being lost to poachers. There's a lot of speculation over how many rhinos are actually left in the wild. You know, I mean, the breeding facilities, they account for between 30 and 40% of all the rhinos left are sitting in private hands, private ownerships in these breeding farms and so on. But the free-range rhinos, the ones that are functioning as part of the ecosystem, there's a lot of speculation about the numbers. Some people say 18,000, some say 11,000, some say 8,000, you know, and they try and predict it with models. And I suppose the most recent attempt was, we know that all the rhinos in the Kruger Park were reintroduced about 40 years ago. So if we use that, we knew what the age demographics were and what the sex ratios were, and at the maximum breeding potential, we're looking at about 11,000 rhinos before the crisis hits, which implies that we've only got a handful left now. Quite frightening, actually. And it's not so much a basic numbers game. It's a little bit more complicated. It's a bit like the economy, you know. So the more spread out the rhinos become on the landscape, the lower the breeding potential of the population is. And also, you know, we're sitting in a drought time now, and we found that the trend, because of the drought, the females are moving around a lot, but the males are territorial and they're sticking around in their territories. So those are the ones that have been taken by the poachers because they're easy prey. You know, it's a soft target. So, you know, the sex ratios are going to be skewed, and in a rhino population you want a 50-50. You want one male for every female to improve the chances of mating, and it's a very density dependent fecundity or breeding success or breeding potential of a population. Density is critical. And, you know, I think we're going to find that we've got a lot of cows, and I'm talking now specifically in this neck of the woods. A lot of cows, not a lot of bulls. We might then attract bulls from the Kruger National Park that are coming in to try and fill those little niches. But whether they get to cover the cows, I don't know. Now, one way or the other, it's not just about numbers. Even if somebody says there's still 1,000 rhinos left in the greater Kruger National Park, that's 1,000 rhinos on 3 million hectares. Good luck to them ever finding each other for a quickie. You know?
Yeah, okay. What are the details of, you know, one monitor's activity in his day? What does he have to look out for on a daily basis?
A day in the life of a rhino monitor.
Exactly.
Now, that could make a very thin book. Be right up there with all the other thin books like conservation breakthroughs for rhinos. Yeah, so our rhino monitoring team, every single day except Sundays, they're in the field with radio telemetry equipment. They have set routes because there's a few rules in data capture, and one of them is standardization. So we try and standardize if we want to plug it into our predictive modeling. we must standardize the route. So they will drive on a set route. The reserve is so big that we've divided it into 5 blocks, so they hit a different block every day. Again, at the same time, they're checking camera traps that have been put up at the places where we know the rhinos like to lurk around, nutrient hotspots or water holes. Remember, they need water holes for 3 purposes as well. Drinking, obviously, cooling down, and wallowing. If there's a nice muddy water hole, they're going to utilize that as well. And that places them at risk because they could be sitting in that water hole for hours, and the poachers will very quickly pick up on the fact that this is a good water hole for rhinos to wallow. If they drink, they're not there for very long, and this is what we worked out with the camera trap data that we've got. It's not just about their presence there, but how long do they spend there, what activity are they doing there, what time of the day are they the most vulnerable, so on and so on. So that's the information that these rhino monitors are bringing back. It's hot. It's 42 degrees, sometimes 46 degrees out there, you know. You know the drill. We're sitting here now. It's certainly not a cool day today either. So those guys work very, very hard for no money whatsoever as well. They're also volunteers. They've been here for a few years and they've learned the tricks and the ropes. Then they must compile a report at the end of every day. And a map goes out to all the anti-poaching stations as well, showing where the hotspots are and where they should concentrate their activities. It's a very critical component of our sort of predictive threat landscape, if you like. You know, I've got 50,000 hectares that I must manage with 7 teams of anti-poaching guys. Now, they can't cover that entire neck of the woods, but if I know where my assets are, they can stick with the assets rather than run around like headless chickens.
How effective is that system proven?
When we implemented that, remember we had lost 19 rhinos before we got involved, and there's a bunch of ecologists and scientists. We had to apply our minds, so that's why we came up with all of these predictive models and so on. Everybody said, oh no, what you need is guns and uniforms, you know, not predictive models. But as soon as we deployed based on that science, we didn't lose a single rhino for 13 months, which was probably some sort of a world record in the Kruger Park, you know. And for 13 months we didn't lose a rhino, and then we started losing rhinos again. And since then we've lost another 6, all in a short space of time, and it was only 4 poaching incidences. And they managed to take 6 rhinos in that time. And embarrassingly enough, it took us 6 rhinos to work out that we had a problem inside. That we no longer had poachers coming in from outside the reserve, but they had actually infiltrated our armed response team. Yeah, so we've addressed that issue, and I mean, this last full moon period was a breeze compared to the previous ones. So I think we might have addressed that issue, but it's taught us a lesson. Monitoring, surveillance, compliance, it's not just covert operations, it's also overt. You know, you've got to keep your own guys on their toes. Okay. Does that help?
It does. That's very good. Okay.
By the way, I would never tell any other press person that my own guys are killing rhinos. I don't hang my dirty washing up for the popular press out there. Only once we've caught them and arrested them and locked them away will I brag about it. But right now, so you've got privilege to have that little bit of information. But it's, you know, I don't know if the thing is still running, but the reality is that a poacher cannot be successful if he does not have an insider. Because, I mean, for example, we could drive around all day, even with the best technology, tracking technology, etc., and the best camera traps, we still will struggle to find rhinoceros. Now, we've got everything at our fingertips, and it's daytime. You know, these guys are coming in at night with no light whatsoever. They're walking straight up and assassinating a rhino. It's an actual assassination because they target a specific animal or a group of animals. You know?
They're not wandering around hoping they'll bump into
Absolutely. It's too risky. You know, it's a snatch and grab operation. They're coming into a spot because they've been told, here's a good place to be. At this time, law enforcement is there, so I suggest you come in here. Escape route is there. You know, so and it's the same in all the parks. That shot came out at last light, 1900. Just enough light to pull the trigger still. See your prey. 10 minutes the horn is off and they're moving out. 3.5 kilometers an hour, they'll be at that 15 minutes time, they'll be at the river crossing. And we've got 2 teams covering 30 kilometers of river. The spoor there, the time elapse between where they picked up the spoor here to there is not that bad actually, so I reckon those guys are going to cross in the next 10 minutes. We have a vehicle that patrols on the outside of the reserve. No one inside the reserve. And then the idea is that if there's something heard, then we move to the known exit points where we know the poachers have come and gone in the past. and hope to pick them up. And then the mobile vehicle, the mobile unit, tries to pick up the tracks very fast. The gunshot or whatever and sticks on the tracks. But remember, anybody moving through the bush now is moving at about 3.5 kilometers an hour. So by the time we react and pick up their tracks and follow them, they're already 3.5 kilometers ahead. So you've got to try and predict where they're going to pop out. And look at this riverfront. They've got to cross the river at some stage. They can cross anywhere now. It's winter, we haven't had rain. It's dry. They can get out anywhere. If they come out the south, look at our borders are open to the world. All they have to do is hide under the bush and wait for the vehicle to go past. You can hear a vehicle coming 1,000 miles away. You can hear trackers tracking. Stand there. Yes, now of course all the conspiracy theories coming. Watch out for this double cab bucky. Watch out for this vehicle. They don't know what its registration is, but it's white and it has 4 wheels. Watch out for that one. Yeah. But now there's morals and ethics involved here as well. Let's say we've got the helicopter gunships with the thermal imaging equipment and all the bells and whistles that they're using in Iraq and Iran and Syria and all over the place. And we detect 3 little barefoot black people running through the bush with a bloody rhino horn in their hand and a rusty old gun that they've stolen from somebody's lodge. Is it justifiable to pull the trigger with your minigun and take him out? I mean, is it justifiable? I think not. If we have a contact with them, we outgun them horribly. It's just managing to have a contact. Yeah, stupid thing this. The ideal outcome would be that we apprehend the guys crossing the river. It'll be ideal. And we recover the horns, recover the weapon, we take them out of the system. The unfortunate part about it is that they'll walk out of jail in a day or two's time.
Why is it that there's not harsher punishment once they're caught?
We work on the Roman Dutch law in this country. It's impossible to convict anybody for something like this. What do you catch him with? Where's the mens rea? Just because he's walking in the bush, the minute he hears you coming, he drops everything and walks away. You apprehend him, goes to court, gets a 50 rand fine for trespassing. How can you prove that that weapon lying in the bush 6 meters away from him is his? How can you prove it wasn't left there by previous poachers? How can you prove that he intended to kill that rhino? He didn't just stumble upon a dead rhino and take the horns off. There's 3 elements to Roman Dutch law. It makes it impossible. Put him in front of a jury of his peers, might be a different story. We don't have that system in South Africa. And, the courts over here are clogged with murder and rape charges. We've got the highest murder and rape cases in the world. Can you imagine somebody going there and game rangers sitting there saying, I want to convict this guy for stealing an animal's horn? Well, how sympathetic do you think the courts are going to be when they're dealing with rape and murder and armed robberies and things every day? Where's the priority? Nah. Everything is stacked against us. The only way that this is going to be solved is if the end user is held accountable.
Walking on the road now. They're still going on the road. Okay.
That could mean that they're onto us.
Okay.
Turn around now.
Yeah, that could be that they heard the Tegaliba vehicle. Yeah, guys, it is possible that they know that they are being followed up on, or they've got wind of our activity, so they could be heading out a different access point now. So just everybody be on your lookout, especially those stopper groups in the south, at the substation, on the railway line road, Yankee 22. Please be on your best behavior. In the international arena, in the political arena, between countries, South Africa must rent. I don't know, if I wanted to sell my child, I made it and raised it and made it healthy for those years. If I wanted to sell it, surely it's my prerogative to sell that child. But the international community won't allow it. They'll say, fuck you, you are not allowed to sell children. It's unacceptable. And it's a little country called Zululand is buying children and making little green biscuits to feed their nation out of them. The rest of the world is going to put sanctions on Zululand until they stop buying children, or they're going to intervene in some way politically to cut their throats so that they can no longer buy children. Because it's against the global norms and standards. We don't like this practice. The whole world will write on my Facebook tomorrow when we put a picture of a dead rhino up saying, oh, it's a shame, it's tragic, it's terrible, you must catch the poachers and cut their throats. Fuck that. Find out who's buying the shit. Cut their throats politically and economically and what have you. And we all know who's buying it anyway. So it's not a black market problem, it's a fucking yellow market problem. Close down the yellow market. That's what I say. And that's about as PC as I can be tonight. So now we've got a team moving in this area. They can't find the tracks coming out, so that vehicle is doing that. This team and that team will stay there all night until first light. That team and that team as well. And then we've got a team moving on this is the Klasuri team moving on this cut line. Over here, then at 0530 the aeroplane is up in the sky. And at 0500 this tracker dogs are on. And then this team breaks away from here and backtracks to try and find where the carcass is. What are you going to do at night time? What are you going to do? Unless you go into Mozambique and blow all those little villages up and use terrorist tactics against them, chop their limbs off and send them back. Of course we can solve it. But do we dehumanize ourselves in the process? You know? For the life of an animal.
Great.
I'm going to get some rum. This is ridiculous. Oh,
How are you living that moment? Is it just routine, or is it still intense? How is it for you to live that?
no, it's very intense. The thoughts that go through your mind, you know when a shot is reported that you lost a rhino.
Yeah.
So immediately that's a little bit difficult for you to comprehend, you know, that you've tried everything. The guys were all in the right places at the right times and so on, yet you still lost a rhino now. There's been a shot. How best to deal with that? What do I do next? And we have our standard operational procedures, but every situation is different. It has its own set of parameters. And, and then to put all those balls in motion, and then half of the time the guys are a little bit caught unawares and trying to put the stopper groups out and what have you, but they're sitting in the wrong places because you anticipated that would happen tonight, but now this has happened tonight. You've really got to rethink our strategy. So you've got to redeploy within minutes. All the time in your mind, you're working out the average rate that the guys are walking, how much time, how big is your window to get your people in place, and if you miss them at this stopper group, then you need to have a secondary line of defense. If you miss them there, then where's the pickup vehicle going to be? Where are they going to exit the park? Can I get a stopper group there? And then that vehicle, they moved past both of our ambushes, and they jumped into a vehicle on the boundary and went scooting down the provincial road, but luckily we had put mechanisms in place and we managed to stop the vehicle after a high-speed car chase. But once they leave the park, we don't actually have any authority. Then we have to rely on the goodwill of the cops out there, you know, that if we do intervene, that they're not going to frown upon it.
Are they contacted?
We did.
Police force?
Yeah, we contacted them at about 1 o'clock in the morning, but only after the incident is done. Otherwise, they come in with lights and sirens blaring, if they come at all.
Okay.
Then they screw the whole thing up.
Right,
To
okay.
be honest. Then for days, sometimes even weeks after that incident, you're dissecting it, you're fleshing it out, you're looking at your predictive modelling, drawing lines on maps to try and see if this happens again, how do I thwart it next time?
Yeah.
Is it the same poachers as the last group? What's their modus operandi? How do I start an investigation? You know.
Yeah. Are the black mambas involved in any way when something goes down?
If they're on duty, yes. It's normally the black mambas that will detect the incursions. So they've been invaluable to us in that respect. If they're on duty at night time during the full moon period, then they've actually had the most success out of any of our, but mainly as a disruptive force, So for example, they will, because we put them in the areas where we know the poachers are going to be successful, and they just put up a disruptive. They sit on top of vehicles with spotlights, they drive around, protecting the rhinos.
Because are they trained in any way to deal with combat?
They are, but we don't arm them.
Okay.
Because I don't want them to be in the position where a poacher is going to lie down and sight them up and pick them off. I don't want that for them. But they are a great disruptive force to the poachers. And our biggest successes have actually been them chasing poachers off in the night time. Yeah, sure, we lose the arrest and, we can't catch up with the guys again and so on. Or they see them coming over the fence and put up a fuss and the guys run away, drop everything and run away. So yeah, the Mambas are involved. Once we identify the gang, then the easiest way to save your rhinos is to eliminate that gang, obviously. Yeah. We have no faith in the National Prosecutions Authority here. We know they're not going to get prosecuted, get slapped on the wrist for legal possession of firearm or whatever. So there's no point in following that route. So eliminate the threat, neutralize, get it out of your face. But after the first one and all the ramifications, you've got to seriously consider whether this is a viable option psychologically. Some people enjoy that sort of thing, but you don't get into conservation because you like to cause death. You get into conservation because you want to nurture life.
Yeah.
So it affects conservationists probably more than it would if somebody chose a career path as a policeman or a soldier. It would be much easier for him to digest. But here you are sitting with a bunch of PhDs in elephant ecology and anthropologists and primatologists and botanists and things all hiding in the friggin' bush with a gun. It's ridiculous, man.
How was it for you when you were actually out in the field combating different forms of... Because you used to, didn't you?
Oh, yes, yeah. Yeah, it was you sort of felt like it was at least one tangible thing that you could go home with at the end of the day and say, gee, I've achieved something for conservation. I made a few arrests, I confiscated a few legal firearms or vehicles that were involved or whatever it might be. So, yeah, it was nice to tick off those blocks. But as you grow up, or you evolve or you mature or whatever in the conservation arena, you suddenly come to the conclusion that it was all for naught. And one of my colleagues said it was like sticking your hand into a bucket of water, grabbing a handful and pulling it out. He said that's how much effect you are having every time you arrest somebody, because it's just thousands of starving people, millions in fact of unemployed people. The social economics are something we need to address. Otherwise it's just a window dressing exercise, having guys running around militarizing national parks. I think in the past we had a lot more authority as well to engage. Our rules of engagement were very different to what they are now. Now you have to be very cautious and follow a force continuum and respond only with the same level of force that the poacher has responded to you and so on. Whereas in the past it was considered almost as if you were protecting crown game, if I can put it in that term, And we had, thank you, Shia, we had pretty much carte blanche on how we dealt with things. None of our field rangers are trained in combat. None of them got into this job because they wanted to be combat officers. They came out here to monitor wildlife and water holes and vegetation surveys and carrying capacity and that sort of thing. Now suddenly we're giving them a machine gun, telling them throw your cyber tracker and your notebook and compass away, pick up a bloody machine gun and go out there and shoot people.
Does that still happen though with poachers nowadays?
Does.
Do they still get shot? Is that legal anymore or not at all?
They are, it's a tricky one because it's not legal, but there are certain circumstances where one can justify it.
Okay.
And it's, it's got to run its usual course in the court of law. So there is a manslaughter case opened or a murder charge laid against the anti-poaching guys or the field rangers or whatever.
Yeah.
And it does run its case.
Okay.
It's, but these guys are not well equipped for that, psychologically and mentally and so on. I think it's asking a lot of a field ranger. Wouldn't be asking a lot of a soldier, but sure, for a field ranger to have to go and...
Because, as you say, when you watch on Facebook, when you see people's reactions, you'd expect an anti-poaching unit to be ready for war, essentially.
Yes.
Ready to go out and fight and defend, put their lives on the line, I'll take a bullet for this rhino. It's kind of a mentality you expect. But you're saying that basically they're not trained in any way to do this.
No, they are.
Okay.
Our anti-poaching unit, for example, is a external service provider that has been trained specifically for this task.
Okay.
But in the Kruger National Park, their resources are the old field rangers that have been sent back, and a lot of the reserves are in the same boat. It's, if I squat down like this, can you still see that thing?
Yeah, sure.
My back is dying a little bit.
Or you can sit, rather.
But it still get us in.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, we need to make a clear differentiation, I think. Wildlife conservation has evolved now. It's no longer counting the trees and working out how many elephants you can sustain on this property and all that, you know. Whereas your toolbox in the past might have been a tape measure and a clipboard with a data sheet on it and a pair of binoculars and a bicycle. It's now war paint, camouflage, and a machine gun.
Okay.
That's how it's
So
evolved.
it's actually going in that way, in that direction.
It is.
Okay.
The parks are becoming militarized.
Because I heard that something like 500 poachers were killed last year, was that?
That's right.
So yeah, it is becoming something of a war zone. That's in Kruger, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
It's,
Okay, so it is actually going that way, because that's what I wanted to ask you next, is what you're expecting to see over the next few years, which way the trend is going, and are there going to be any reactions to it?
Yeah, I think if I can play Nostradamus for a while,
Yeah.
you know, and cast my mind into the future, if we carry on at this rate, we're going to sit with communities on our borders. There's massive rift between the national park and the communities, because the communities are going to be full of orphans and widows that absolutely despise anything with a shoulder badge like this, an epaulet or something.
Okay.
All they're going to think of is their father or their husband or their brother or whatever that
of
went
course.
into the park to put food on the table and came back in a body bag. So it's not a sustainable approach whatsoever.
For the rhinos themselves, what's the trend now, and what should we expect to see, basically?
Yeah, look, we're losing hands down at the moment. Everybody is. So the rhinos I think we're probably looking at reintroducing rhinos again in 20 years' time.
Okay.
That's where the trend is going. At the moment, they are spread out on the landscape. The breeding success of the population is obviously going to diminish the more spread out they are.
Yeah.
The demographics are going to shift, you know, the sex ratios, etc. So long before the last rhino is taken, the rhino population is unsustainable. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
It's not so. It's too easy to say it's a numbers game. There's still 2,000 rhinos left. They're spread out on 3 million hectares of land. Their breeding success is very poor. So, you know, eventually you get to that stage on the graph where the population is no longer sustainable because they're dying faster than they can breed.
Yeah.
And we passed that threshold already last year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is that black rhino or all rhino?
All rhino.
Rhino is still considered an asset then for a private property then?
Yeah, at the moment, but it's going to, a lot of rumblings, you know, it's going to turn because there's a lot of rumblings now where people are saying it's costing us X amount to protect an asset that is only worth Y amount. You know, so should we not sell the assets, put that money in a bank account, or move the assets to a private breeding facility and pay them monthly to look after them for us so we can reintroduce when the poachers go away?
Okay.
The reason why that hasn't happened yet, even though they speak about it, is because I think deep down everybody knows that this is not about rhinos. This is actually about the integrity of the park at the end of the day. You know, they'll still come in, they'll poison waterholes for lions, they will break into lodges and steal TVs and hi-fis and 4x4s, or they'll kill elephants, etc. It's not, you know, rhinos is really just a symptom. The fact that they've been taken. And yeah, they will disappear off the landscape. We'll reintroduce them again, like we've done several times in the past, in response to poaching pressure, and then it'll happen again.
So it's more of a cyclical thing than a...
Seems to be
final
cyclical.
end. Yeah.
It does. That's why we need to put mechanisms in place now to alleviate the causal factor, the social economic factors. I don't have the answer to that, you know, but I think unless we prepare ourselves, you know, we think if we don't get the rhino thing under control, then apart from all the orphans and the widows sitting on our border, we're also going to have a community that only has one skill set, and that's sneaking over the boundary fence at night time, stealing wildlife or whatever high-value species they can lay their hands on, and selling it to the end user or the middleman or whatever. So if that's the only skill set you've got left on your border, when the rhinos are gone, those guys are not going back to pushing wheelbarrows and planting corn. They're coming in, and the elephants are definitely the next target species.